Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Daniel Hickson and I am here with Josh Pearsall. Am I saying that right? Pearsall?
Yes, most people get that wrong, but you got it right.
Okay, excellent. Um, and he is a member of the Global Methodist Church, and he's got a YouTube ministry and some other online ministry. And we thought it would be interesting for us to talk a little bit about the roots of the Wesleyan revival and where the GMC is going, and how that might fit in with Anglicanism and some movements toward greater convergence there. So Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Yep. First, just like say it's an honor to get to talk to you. I'm a big fan of everything you do. But for me myself, Joshua Pearsall, you said I run a channel called Practical Christian Lessons, and it's mostly, or at least it was intended to be mostly a teaching ministry, but now it also functions much as an apologetics ministry, defending messianic thought from skeptics, the Trinity in the Bible, addressing some of the conflicts between Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and the Protestant world at large. And I definitely want to, help, especially in the Methodist world right now, push people towards our roots, not just in Wesleyan thought, but in Arminian thought, going back to the early church as well. And of course, first and foremost, the scriptures, and just being like, we clearly went wrong, and I don't think it was just in practices and the way we do things. You don't get to that point without something else being a hiccup first.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely need to look back at the table. I mean, that's American Christianity at large. I don't know where we went wrong on such a large scale, but we did go wrong in quite a few places somewhere down the line, and we need to really sit down and start looking at a lot, because it's easy to see the big things, but the small things aren't so big. But in my non-online life, I'm in seminary. I'm working towards becoming a prison chaplain. I'm in the middle of an interview process for a recovery addiction ministry here where I live. Hopefully that works out. I'd love to be pastoring in the house with those guys. And I am a lay teacher, and I'm becoming a certified lay minister for the Global Methodist Church. So I don't know what that will end up doing. Maybe they'll put me in a church somewhere, maybe they won't. But I'm happy to
Bet
serve
they
wherever
will.
they need. Yeah, yeah, probably. And then of course I'm married. My wife's Patty Pearsall. She's amazing. It's just us currently. Lord willing, that will hopefully change soon. But that's kind of me.
Awesome. Where are you in seminary?
I'm it's I think I'm a second year student technically. I started with like one class at a time, then two classes, because I started while I was in my undergrad at Asbury Theological Seminary. They let you start early, and then you can take like 15 credit hours before you have to then, fully enroll. So
Mm.
I started in 2023, I think, the summer. But then I took full-time loads, and taken extra classes on top of having the short classes. So I think it all balances out to about 2 years. I'm hoping to be done in the next 2 years.
All
Lord
right.
willing, I will be able to take on a very full school schedule, but we'll see how that goes.
Man, yeah, and you sounds like you've got plenty on your plate. So
Yeah.
God bless you in that.
Yep.
So when you reached out to me, you raised a question that is definitely something that's of interest to me. I mean, I was part of the United Methodist Church, left. Many of my friends and colleagues also, and churches I've been around have left as well. And a lot of them, though not all of them, but a lot of them have kind of coalesced in the Global Methodist Church. And um, there's that's a lot of excitement, and I would say probably a lot of uncertainty, and kind of figuring out, well, how is this thing going to work. And I think a lot of people are probably wrestling with the very question you just kind of raised about, like, where did things go wrong, and where we got to the point where we had a split and we had all the problems that we had.
Yeah.
And so how do you rebuild a movement of sort of Wesleyan Christianity, and guard against repeating mistakes of the past and build something that's healthier. And of course, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't really theological in nature, but just kind of built up over time in terms of processes and structures that I think maybe was started for some useful purpose, but just came to have its own sort of weight, and became burdensome.
Yeah.
So how do you clear some of that out? So anyway, I know people are wrestling with that.
Yeah.
Um, And what you asked was, what are some ways maybe that the global Methodist Church can look back, I want to hear your thoughts on this, to the Anglican Church that nurtured the Wesley brothers. And for those who don't know much about the Wesley revival, it was an evangelical revival happening concurrently with other parts of the Great Awakening in the Church of England. And John and Charles Wesley were two of the main leaders. They were both priests in the Church of England. Their father was also an Anglican priest. Their older brother, Samuel, was also an Anglican priest as well. And so they were very much within Anglicanism. And that's where they wanted their revival movement, really, I think, to stay, even though John laid the groundwork for it
Yeah.
to not stay. So what does it look like? Are there treasures in that heritage that the GMC can pick up right now, and bear fruit? So what are your? I mean, I'm sure you've been thinking about that more than I have. What do you see going on?
Um, I mean, aside from procedural things that concern me, Kevin Watson in one of his recent books detailed like the rise of the importance of the academic institution and institutions in general in Methodism. Really, we could probably expand that to like American Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
and the concern with worldly power overtaking a lot of important things. But I also know there's like this sort of allergy, it seems, at least in some parts of American Methodism, to anything Anglican. I in my own church, I wear a rosary, and I just heard like that's too Catholic. I don't even know how
Mm-hmm.
many times, things like that. But look,
That
like what you
what kind
said,
of rosary is that?
well, I believe it. This is Saint Bede, but I don't, pray Hail Marys or anything on it. I mostly do Jesus prayers, and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
do some meditation on scripture and stuff like that. But like John and Charles, good Anglicans. John perhaps foolishly didn't see what he was doing. It's probably one of the my favorite things reading. I was looking back over doctrinal standards by Thomas Oden, and he notes, there's kind of
Mm-hmm.
two thoughts when Wesley wrote the 24 articles that we now have as the 25 for the American Methodist. There are several. I recommend any Methodist get this book and read it. People who sort of look at that entire endeavor and go, it's clear Wesley didn't intend for the American Methodist movement to sort of split off and then start doing its own thing independent of what had come before it. You could perhaps call Wesley foolish for not seeing that that wasn't what was going to happen. It should have been pretty obvious, but that was clearly his assumption, and I think there was wisdom in that. I don't think we should have just ditched everything. I think when we take things like the 24 articles that we made the 25, it can't hurt to at least go back and look at the 39 articles and be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you know, let's learn from that. Let's learn from the Book of Homilies that nurtured John and Charles Wesley and George Whitefield and made
Mm-hmm.
them the preachers and movers that they were in their time. Because despite some thought, dead dead repeated repetitive liturgy is only in dead and repetitive as the people doing it.
But there were people who were uncomfortable with some aspects of Anglicanism and like, well, that's too Catholic. I think that is a fairly common, at least in some parts of the country, a fairly common kind of reaction. Um, and I've always I went to a Catholic elementary school, Roman Catholic, and so I've always kind of had probably a more positive vision of Roman Catholicism, though they have some significant errors, I think. But I don't think it's good to define your whole tradition in contradistinction to what someone else is doing. Like our whole identity is not them. What happens when they change, like Vatican II, and they actually take on a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
your reforms? I mean, it's Roman Catholicism is a moving target, um,
Yeah.
just like anything else.
Yeah, I remember John Wesley in the midst of, the battle with the Reformed and Calvinism in his time. And not that he had nice words to say on double predestination, but he just openly told people if you're rejecting something just because the Calvinists teach it, you are in sin, and that's a problem. And it's like
Mm-hmm,
we kind of lost that mindset, not
mm-hmm.
just with Calvinism, but it feels like, and I mean, maybe this is an American Christianity thing. I'm not sure, but it just feels like there's so much allergicness to anything that's not our own little camp. I'm just like, I feel like that's a little closed there.
Yeah, and it might come from a place of insecurity or something like that. One of the things that I've mentioned in recent videos is I, like you probably, I see a lot of apologetics videos on YouTube where somebody's, why this group is wrong or this group is the best. And then there's like a rebuttal video and a rebuttal to the rebuttal. And,
Yeah.
you see a lot of that. And I don't know, I find on the one hand, I learn a lot from these videos about like nuance and details of theological distinctions and debates. But at the same time, I'm a little hesitant about the spirit of that whole thing and what kind of witness is that to
Yeah.
random Joe on YouTube who is just wanting to learn about Christianity or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're doing a little of that. How do you feel about that? I've thought about doing
Yeah.
a little more of that than I've done, but I don't know.
Um, it's definitely a hard line. There are two recent videos actually. I think this past week that came out. I can point to that were like the best examples possible. Gavin Ortland put a video, defending credo baptism because he's a Baptist, but he talks about both sides and explores church history there. And he does it in a very thoughtful, nuanced, caring, graceful way. You read Galatians 5:22 through 26. You see that in that video. Anglican Aesthetics made a response to that video. I think like maybe this at the end of that day or the next morning, and his video is much in the same spirit,
Hmm.
where he's like, Gavin makes good points. He has good history that he's looking to and making good arguments from what he's looking at. Here's why I disagree, and like isn't just being like, oh, Credo Baptists are ridiculous and just reject all church history, like you
Hmm.
hear. I don't know how many YouTube videos I've heard of that. So the spirit in which people do that is important. And then, like as you said, I don't do much in terms of rebuttal videos because I'm with Gavin. He's just like, once you get past like two rebuttal videos, you're just doing too much. Just
Yeah.
like I don't even know if I want to do one. I'm happy to like write an article or make a response on something
Hmm.
someone said, but doing like a chain of videos, I'd rather just like meet with you in person and have a discussion or
Hmm.
something than do a series of videos. But that
Yeah.
doesn't do well on YouTube. People don't click through those as much.
One thing I'm curious about, I've seen your channel, I've seen the Method Ministries channel. Are there other YouTube channels, whether they're doing teaching or apologetics or what have you, that are kind of connected with the GMC that you like, or I just don't know of many. I know of a couple, but
I, I'm not aware of any that are like, plenty of GMC churches put their sermons up online.
right, yeah, there's tons of that
The
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, the bishops have been doing some teaching series, but that's mainly like geared towards the church itself, and they're not moving them out quickly, so there's not a whole lot of them. Um, Jeffrey Rickman on Plain Spoken Podcast is one I'm aware that's an exception. He's not a voice everyone will agree with.
Right.
I love Jeffrey because he's just honest, and his name implies he is plain spoken. He's not hiding anything, and whether or not you
Right.
agree with him, at least he's pushing the conversation forward because he pushes for a lot of conversations people would rather just not have. But if we're not having those conversations, problems won't get addressed. People won't be discussing it, and we're just gonna keep on how we've been keeping on, and that hasn't done so well.
Mm.
Um, but outside of them, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I'm just not aware of them like advertising themselves as that.
Right. You mentioned Rickman. I know him a little bit. I actually did a video with him like a year or two ago.
Yep.
Um, and I watch his channel off and on, now and then. And he reminds me there are folks in the ACNA kind of in a similar vein. And on the one hand, it's like, man, y'all are being so negative all the time about all these problems, but at the same time, like most of us would probably like brush them under the rug
Yeah.
if we didn't have those voices. So I can kind of see both sides of that. Why people might not like his channel, but why it also might
Yeah.
be helpful and useful to be there. So I know he also has had some conversation about a lot about the GMC kind of forming its kind of character and its
Yeah.
identity. And I think he's also somebody who's a little bit more, you might say, on the high sacramental liturgical end of things,
Yeah.
as I also was in Methodist circles. Um, and he's talked about, maybe there's a little tension between kind of a more charismatic, non-denominational kind of flavor
Yeah.
of global Methodism and kind of a more traditional sacramental liturgical flavor. Do you see any of that, or is that overstated, or what are your thoughts?
Uh, Well, he and I are both in Oklahoma, and that definitely seems to be a big thing here. And of course, as we're getting connected with South America, they even their Roman Catholics is just it's like charismatic everywhere in South America. That just is their flavoring. And
Hmm.
very much the same with Africa. So on the international scene, there's definitely that influence. I can't speak to other parts of the United States, but from what I've heard, it does seem to be a common thing. We're getting people who maybe are on closer towards the Pentecostal side, but still roughly in the Methodist world that are coming into the Global Methodist, and people who have joined into the Global Methodist from that end. But there does seem to be there, and like, I mean, it's not just my church. My church, the current church I'm attending, isn't GMC. I'm finishing up my teaching arrangements there, and then I'll be on my way out. Um, but they are from the Methodist world broadly, at least were before they disaffiliated. And they're very much on that, lower church side. That seems to be the very common thing down here. And that when our new head pastor first started, I remember, even though he made it in very many ways more of that low church evangelical world, he did introduce more liturgy and stuff. And I remember, like, I think a solid 2 months, and even still every once in a while they have to like talk about why is it we're doing liturgy and like give a defense for why they're doing it. So there's still like
Hmm.
pushback in my own church on it, and I know that's very common, and I don't know what
Hmm.
it is with people not liking liturgy. Maybe it's an Oklahoman thing, I don't know, but they seem to really push against it. Yeah.
Interesting. I almost all of my life has been lived in Louisiana, and a little bit in Texas and now Florida. And in Louisiana Methodist churches, it was fairly consistent. If you went to a traditional service,
Yeah.
it was pretty much the same elements everywhere you went. So everybody did the doxology every week. Everybody did the Apostles' Creed. Everybody did the Gloria Patri. Everybody did the Lord's Prayer. Some people did weekly communion. Some people did monthly. Most everybody seemed to use the Great Thanksgiving, or at least some kind of abbreviation of
Yeah.
it. That was kind of what I was used to, but never. I don't know if I've ever been to Oklahoma. Certainly, I've never been involved in a church over there.
Yeah. I know we have traditional churches and services. So I've looked around online at places and seen how they do their services, and there are, that I go to the contemporary service. It's called. It's at the 11 a.m. It's the more modern worship style. We're not doing hymns as much as I would love to just yell, pull out the hymnal from beneath your seat. But in the 8 a.m. service, which is our traditional service, you know, it is an older crowd, but they didn't seem to have those same issues. And other churches in our area that do have those more traditional services, they tend to put all their stuff at the front of the service, and then worship, sermon, and then I've seen like Eucharist either at the end or in the middle of the service. I'm not sure why there's a divide there on like why it's in the middle or the end, but
Mhm.
they didn't seem to have as much issues with that. But then anywhere that was doing the contemporary services and things like that, or where that was the only service, there tends to be this big pushback.
I got to know the Book of Common Prayer really through attending an Episcopal church in college, and came back into the UMC. I've been in the UMC as a kid, came back into the UMC in college, and one of the things that I found really encouraging was I got a UMC hymnal and opened it up in the front and found almost the identical
Yeah.
liturgy from the prayer book, and later found out about the Book of Worship and things like that. I've got, unless I gave it away, I might have given it away. The Great Redeemer's Praise hymnal that I guess Seedbed put out. Um, and I've heard people say that the GMC is working on a book of worship. Do you know if anything like that is in the works, or have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard anything about that. But I've been involved in a bunch of different conversations. No one's talking to me about the worship thing, but I will ask some of the people in worship I know, see if they know anything going on about that. Because I would absolutely encourage and love to hear how that's going, if that's happening.
Yeah. The UMC Book of Worship, I don't know if you've spent much time with it. It has a
Yeah.
lot of good stuff in it that's mostly taken from the 1979 prayer book. And then it has a lot of like weird stuff in it too, and or some, not maybe not a whole lot, but some stuff that I thought was a little like, we got this from a Hindu tradition or a Native American tradition, and
Yeah.
changed a word or two and plopped it in here. And um, but there was a pretty obvious reliance upon the prayer book tradition, and I I hope that they're still doing that. The Great Redeemer's Praise hymnal, I know some GMC churches are using it, and the Eucharistic liturgy and the baptismal liturgy, it looks like they kind of took the 2019 Anglican prayer book of the
Yeah.
ACNA and the United Methodist hymnal and kind of just like merged them together. I feel
Yeah.
like there's elements from both kind of interspersed, and uh, so it was very familiar to me. So maybe more work in that direction will be coming. I think that would be great
That'd
uh,
be awesome.
in terms of convergence of the traditions. Um, I don't know. I don't know to what extent those are being used,
I mean,
widely or not. But
I would tell them, I don't know, I see it over there, my 2019 book of common prayer. I would tell them just go and steal that one. Like
Mhm.
literally just use that one. That would be the best formatting of a book of common prayer I've ever seen. It's easy to follow. It looks nice. That's a big
Mhm.
thing. A lot of the
Mhm.
ones I've seen don't necessarily look so nice. But that one is just smooth. And I do remember hearing, because I do attend a GMC church on Wednesdays when I'm free for their midday Eucharist service. And I remember here every time we do their Eucharist service, I constantly have to like stop myself when they're like with your spirit in the Great Redeemers one rather than and with you. And I'm like, wait, hold on, I did it wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
It feels like we get it wrong every week.
yeah. We do at the church I'm serving now, the Mission Anglican Church. We say, and also with you. And I had just gotten used to saying, "and with your spirit," and so now I'm like trying to like check myself every time we get into that. And with your spirit is, of course, the more ancient usage.
Yeah.
I also really like the 2019 prayer book. There are lots of people who are like, "Oh, it's not as good as this or not as good as that," but I think it has a lot of good qualities. And I agree. If they would just like cut and paste it, I'm sure
Oh,
the
yeah.
ACNA would be really cool with that for
Yeah.
the most part. And most of it, I think, except for the Psalms, is like you know uh, public domain. I guess it's open source and you can use it.
Yeah.
So, anything you'd like to add, or any other thoughts, or
Yeah, I definitely want to just exhort any Methodist listening, don't be afraid to like where I had it here on my desk somewhere. Here it is. I mean, this is more of a treatise thing, but like this is John Jewell's two treatises on Holy Scripture and on the sacraments. Um, we need to recover high sacramentology. That was a vital part of the Methodist movement, is the means of grace. It wasn't just going out preaching wrath and salvation to people who had never heard it. It was also being like, hey, these things that have shaped the spiritual life of the church really need to come back. I think the centrality of worship has really been lost in American Christianity. And the fact we've lost that in Methodism is probably even greater tragedy, some of the other traditions,
mm,
because that was so central, right? Wesley was constantly exhorting every chance you can, partake in the Eucharist, go to church, be
yes,
together. The miners, I believe in, I want to say Bristol, but I could be getting that wrong, who were so rambunctious and violent, the military would have to be called in to settle them down. When Whitfield and then Wesley came in and preached to them and converted them, they started then going to a church service at like before they went to work at 7 in the morning, would work 12 hours and then come back for another church service. And I'm just like, we are so far from that now in American
yes.
Christianity.
So thanks everybody for watching. And again, where can they find you on online if we're still recording?
You can find me virtually everywhere I am, which can be like Substack. I just started on TikTok. I might probably won't engage with you in the comments, but I'm putting videos on there. YouTube, everything is practical Christian lessons, or it'll be like PCL, one of those two things. I believe on my YouTube channel, I have all those links there and the like profile page. So if you can't find it like with a Google search bar, go to the YouTube page and it should all be there in the description.